There are many obstacles that can block the path to a successful software project. When you come across one, it helps to think like a seasoned hiker and follow the trail marked by blue blazes around the problem so that you can get back on course and keep moving forward. Welcome to Blue Blazes Podcast. I'm your host for the journey, Jay Tower, and I'm a partner and principal consultant at Trailhead Technology Partners. In this series, we talk with industry experts who share their best tips for avoiding the pitfalls on the path to successful software projects. My guest on this episode of Blue Blazes is Sam Basu. Sam is a technologist, author, speaker, Microsoft MVP, and gadget lover. His day job is as a developer advocate for the Telerik products at Progress Software. With his deep background in development, Sam now spends much of his time advocating for modern web, mobile, and cloud developers working in JavaScript and the Microsoft stack. In his spare time, he loves travel, fast cars, cricket, and culinary adventures with his family. In our conversation today, Sam and I talk about using third-party component libraries in your software projects, and how doing so can greatly improve the quality and overall success of those projects. Let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the Blue Blazes podcast, Sam. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
Well, it's very good to see you. I know we often get to run into each other at events around the country and sometimes around the world. But it's been a couple months, so it's nice to see you again.
Indeed. We are old men doing the thing with the thing in software, trying to make, developers a little bit more productive and successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we jump into our conversation today, which I think is a really great topic, I wonder if you could just give a little bit of background about who you work for and what you do for them.
Sure. So I'm Sam. I am a developer advocate for Progress Software. And we have a huge portfolio of tools and products, all aimed at developers mostly, some design thinking as well. But I come from a heavy .NET background. I do just enough JavaScript to be dangerous. But, I'm an old man. I've been doing this for, 15, 20 years now. And again, I love being out in the dev community. I love learning from people and their experiences. And I try to contribute back whatever little I can with my, set of passions of, technologies that I've grown up with, things that I've seen, evolve, and, just, tips and tricks, anything that developers can do to, be better at their jobs.
Yeah. So I'd say a .NET developer, Java developer, testers, anybody looking for a CMS, these are all things that they could reach out to you or to Progress about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of folks might not, recognize, especially in the .NET space, just the name Progress Software, but, we are the makers behind the Telerik suite of products, which is a lot of UI for .NET and JavaScript across web, desktop, mobile, IoT, you name it. We are also known for Fiddler, which is a network debugging tool. We are known for our CMS, which is Sitefinity. Along the way, we have, rules engines, different types of, proprietary IDEs and platforms that have been around for 25 plus years. So it's just a big portfolio of products that make up what Progress Software is today.
You mentioned a lot of those, but a good chunk of them are what you might call component libraries. For people, probably a lot of people listening are familiar with those, but for anyone that isn't, could you kind of give like the elevator pitch for what a component library is and how it makes a software project easier and better?
Sure. Yeah. So no matter what type of app you're building, if you look at modern web apps or desktop apps, which again, you and me are old, but that still runs a lot of enterprise workflows.
Yeah.
You look at the mobile story, which is user engagement with devices in your pockets. So no matter what type of app you're doing, user experience is kind of key. That's how you keep people engaged and inviting them back into your app. And a big part of driving that user experience is through UI. It needs to be fluid. It needs to do its job, not be too complicated. So no matter what be your technology stack of choice, it could be anything in the .NET world. If you look at everything that Microsoft has put out in the last 20 years, everything from desktop, everything from web and mobile, and how things have evolved. Maybe you're writing JavaScript apps, modern web apps with Angular, React, or Vue, or whatever is the framework of choice. UI is something everybody has to do. Every app has to do, and sometimes we developers are not the best in terms of how we think about UI. We think about it in a very one-dimensional way. We think our users would use it in a certain way, which invariably doesn't often match with what or how they're using it. So usability studies and UX is important, but we also struggle sometimes to come up with the UI that's going to be the key part of our app itself. And it's not that we are challenged to build it ourselves; it just takes a lot of engineering. I've been in this business a long time. I've tried building grids and charts by hand. It's just a lot of work, and you're also signing up for a lot of maintenance because you have your users demanding app functionality and features, and that's going to be constant. And yet you'll be, trying to maintain a functionality of a UI component over the period of its lifetime. So it just becomes a big, technical debt to take on to do by yourself. Again, there is nothing wrong in it. I also know a lot of customers who have built. So by a component, what I mean is something that's a reusable part of a certain part of your UI, and that's the thing that you can either get for somebody who's built it professionally, or you can try building it yourself. And I've seen a lot of people have good success building it yourself. It all depends on the type of app, the niche industry that you might be in, and so on. But overwhelmingly, it seems like it's just a very difficult thing to do, which is why we keep on saying, do not reinvent the wheel when it comes to UI, because it's a difficult place to be. And again, I'm obviously biased. I work for Telerik and Kenda UI and all those products. They're near and dear to my heart, but there are plenty of other players in this space as well. So when you are building up a new app and you are, thinking about building a new dashboard or a very modern app, web app that needs to have very fluid, UI, busy but complex UI, or you want to have a mobile app that needs to be, driving different types of views based on different, device form factors. For all of that, you need UI that needs to be consistent. And that's where the component, folks come in and say, we're going to give you a UI component that you can trust. It's well engineered. It's performant. It's not going to get in the way. It has, full flexible APIs, so developers can do however use it however you want. And it's going to be backed by a solid, documentation and a support system, because enterprises invariably need support. You're going to run into very unique issues that may have not been thought out, and you want to be able to reach out to a set of folks who have built a UI to say, hey, I want this unique thing. So support, documentation, developer experience, these are all important. And at the end of the day, you have a set of folks who will stand by you throughout the lifetime of your app and get a usable part of UI. So that's the whole, component business.
Yeah, that's a great elevator pitch. I think the, don't reinvent the wheel is really to me, is the takeaway summary there. For some reason, I think us engineers can all have a tendency to see something that someone built and say, "Oh, I could do that," which is probably true. That. But you make a million rounding errors on all of the work that's involved in actually building something like that, making it work in all the different browsers and backwards compatibility and blah blah blah, right? And so you sort of underestimate significantly the work it's going to take to reinvent that wheel.
Yeah. And I mean, especially in this day and age where we are increasingly thinking about applications that are cross-platform, right? You would like your web apps to be ubiquitous, that just runs and looks and feels the same, or, it renders appropriately for the device that you're on. The same can be said about mobile and desktop. So, you see the proliferation of cross-platform frameworks, and we have had lots and lots of these over the last decade or two. Everything from the web standpoint, everything from .NET standpoint, and when you look at these platform differences, that is even more of a challenge to build a grid or build a chart or build
Yeah.
any part of a UI
Hmm.
that adjusts to different platforms. You
Hmm.
want mouse and keyboard when you are on desktop. You want touch, maybe even VR or other ways of interacting with your app on different devices. You want that consistency of that UI to be
Yep.
the same or rendered appropriately for each device. So that becomes even more of a challenge.
And at the end of the day, I've been a consultant for a long time, and I don't think I've ever run into a team that is looking to add extra work to their backlog. Usually, it's the other way.
Right.
And you've only got so many hours in the day, and if you spend a lot of them building components that exist already, you're not going to spend them solving the unique problems for your business, right?
Right, right. And again, I mean, it's also a little bit beyond just components because you look at things that enterprise workflows invariably need. Your developers are going to need some testing solutions, like when they are going through cycles, they're pushing out apps just to have more confidence for every build iteration. You need reports invariably because your C-level folks or folks who are out on the field, they need reports in hand delivered at a certain schedule. You need network support, you need UI UX tools. So it's just a whole assortment of challenges, and you are trying to serve your business needs and your app features. You just don't want to be bogged down by so much of the other things that you have to build from scratch.
Right. This conversation reminds me of kind of an old debate that goes back to probably the beginning of this industry, which is the buy versus build debate, which I think is often thought of in kind of black and white terms. Like, are you going to buy the whole thing or are you going to build the whole thing? But there's gray in between. You could build the whole thing, but not have to reinvent your own reporting platform or your own UI components, right?
Absolutely, and we are very conscious of this. So if you look at any of our web UI component suites, we have them from everything ASP.NET, from web forms to MVC to Razor to Blazor. If you look at desktop, WPF, WinForms, UWP, .NET MAUI. Same with mobile Xamarin .NET MAUI. So across the plethora of all of our products, we are very conscious that it's not a black or white thing. You might be ready to build some very unique things that your app needs, but maybe it's the grid that's your pain point. You
Mm-hmm.
have customers who are demanding sorting, filtering, all types of fancy reordering in your grid, and that's your pain point, and that's the only thing you want to do. You don't need anything else, and that's fair. So you can get everything from us, or you can just say, just give me a WPF grid and I'm happy with that. And even with that, WPF suite, everything is broken out. So we don't want to add extra bloat to your app. So when you take a dependency, it's more of a partnership with us, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
want to enable you to just use whatever lit you want, or the whole thing if you want. But we give you, separate NuGet packages for, a family of UI products that need a certain UI library. So your dependencies are as little as possible.
Mm. So, in your role as the face or a face of the company out there at events, meeting people, talking to people who are using the products, what are the most common complaints you get about just using third-party components in general? What are people bumping into the most that you notice?
There is always more we can do in terms of documentation, and we spend a lot of time making sure the developer experience is good. Because if you're struggling, then that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And often, as dev advocates, we are like the first customers. Like I talk a lot to our engineering teams, and I talk a lot to our customers, and I'm often the one who's complaining the loudest during the initial phases of a product because I'm trying to use it myself, and I'm running into roadblocks, and I would try to make sure no other developer has the same roadblock. So I complain a lot, and it goes both ways. But sometimes we will build things and not anticipate how our end users, other developers, might be using it. And sometimes it's an engineering challenge that we can try to go fix. Sometimes it just needs a little bit of rethinking. I cannot tell you how many times I have sat down with a developer or a team who's using a certain component from us, and they use it in such a complex way that we have not thought about.
Hmm.
So envision like you have a very busy grid, and when you click on any row of the grid, it opens up to show you, two more grids and some more charts. And it's just a lot of data that you're loading up on the client side. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, we sit down and work with their engineering to say, can you rethink how you're doing this? It's not like, I mean, all of the UI components, not just from us, like the goal is to engineering them right so that they don't get in the way of performance. But again, like you said, we are developers. We love to reinvent things, and give us the power. We like to shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes. So sometimes it means, let's rethink how you want to present this information. Do you
Sure.
really need things are virtualized, things will load on demand, but do you really need 100,000 records on the client side
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
get-go?
Well,
So some of that.
I won't make you comment what percent of those customers you talk to are doing things in a weird way that's just kind of goofy, in a weird way that's actually like innovative. But I'm sure it's
Yeah.
not
And
100%
and
either.
right, and there might be a legitimate need for some things. And again, anything we can do to optimize UI components on our side, we will. We will, look at very unique use cases. If people can share a little bit of their sample project, we will, go to no ends trying to fix things right for them. But
Yeah.
overall, performance is a big concern. And also some of the other concerns are, again, things we don't always think from the get-go is, if you're building an enterprise app, if you're doing anything with government agencies, accessibility. Little things like contrast and color, being able to easily switch things in and out. Those are not things you think from the get-go, but those can become very big challenges when it comes to getting your app out and live. So it helps to have things where these concerns are well thought out. So
Yeah.
all of the UI components that you are lighting up your apps with behave in a certain consistent way. You can trust them to honor certain standards.
You mentioned performance. I imagine that another issue that probably comes up occasionally with clients as kind of a concern about bringing in some third party library is security, in addition to performance. So, I'm sure you have probably some good answers for that, right off the top of your head. But how do you encourage clients to think about that? Because I think there is still a little bit of this kind of maybe anti-open source, or this mentality of like, if I didn't write it myself, I don't know how it works, and it could have huge performance or security holes in it that I don't know about.
Yeah, and in this day and age, I think we all have to be conscious about cybersecurity and protection of intellectual property and so on. So from the get go, like when you use a UI component suite from us, like we give you all the code. So yes, you didn't write it, but you get to see it all. It's not a black box that we're giving you. But beyond that, you are in charge a little bit of your own security, how you enable things on your side, especially for web apps or mobile apps, how you protect your intellectual property. In terms of being open with what the component does, what the UI does, a lot of it is open source, what we do, but a lot of it is not. But again, it doesn't mean it's not something you can see. You can absolutely take a UI component that we have written and morph it to make it absolutely your own. But then you are kind of breaking off from the main branch. If you can give us some use cases where what you are trying to do with a certain UI component might benefit others, then we are more than happy to try to consider bringing that into the main branch. But if you do something very unique on your own, you're welcome to. You have the source code to do that, but you are going to have a mismatch when we keep starting pushing updates on the main branch.
Yeah.
So those are always concerns, but we try to be as open as we can. We have been here for for a software company, it's hard to come across people saying we've been here for 40 years and we're here. So some of the component business, that's maybe 20 years or so, but we're not going anywhere. We try to act with all honesty, with our best interests and your best interests. We give you what you are using source code wise, and beyond that, it's up to you.
Yeah.
We will, give you big service releases, in between the major releases as well. Any types of security patches that come out from Apple, Microsoft, or Google, we would immediately patch and make sure updates are available to you. But beyond that, it's your intellectual property.
Nice. I like to say a joke sometimes in my conference talks that I'm doing when there's like a third party security concern is, the kind of engineering perspective of I would like to write this all myself so that all the security vulnerabilities are my fault and not somebody else's.
Yeah, I think overall, in our industry, like when we say things about first or third party, I mean there are some connotations that come with. There
Yeah,
are certain things that Microsoft or Angular or React, the makers of the frameworks don't want to do. So it is not like a third party that you're taking on. It's just a part of the ecosystem. This is
right.
how you build a modern app with all the tools and the utilities in your belt to be successful.
Yeah,
Yes, you can just go off the framework and try to do everything on your own, but that needs a lot more time, investment, money, and effort wise.
totally.
Or you can run with something you can depend on and have a set of folks that will support you throughout the journey. In an ideal world, we would like everything to be open source and everything to be free for all, but good solid engineering with security in mind, with accessibility in mind, that's expensive for no matter what be your company. So
Totally.
at some point, people have to keep their lights on, and enterprises who need that dependability need things to be professionally built.
Yes. Yeah, it's like adding to your, even if you're a one person team, this is like all the Telerik developers are on your team too, right? Like
Yeah,
you're adding to your team.
thank you. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
um,
It's just professional engineering is what you're buying into.
yeah, exactly. So what strategies do you recommend for people who start including third party components? Because then one of the things that comes up is keeping it up to date. Um, if you're on a certain version of your programming language or the framework that you're programming against, like .NET or something, there's versions of that, and then there's versions of all your NuGet packages or your npm packages. Now you've added kind of another one with your components. How do you recommend people think about keeping that up to date?
Right, and different companies might take different strategies about solving this. Here's kind of our stance: like you get a UI component suite from us, you have it for life. No one's taking away. You can ship as many apps as you want, either as a consultant or as a part of your enterprise. Licenses are tied to individuals, and that can be transferred. Like if you leave a company, it can be transferred to another developer in your company. So it is your property to use for life. However, you also get updates for a year. Beyond that, if you don't need the updates, you can turn it off and just keep using your app however you want. But maybe you come back 5 years down the line, you realize that your Angular or your .NET has moved on, and then you need to update not just the runtime and the framework, but also the UI components of it from us. So we are very conscious of this. We are always shipping updates in line with what .NET or Angular or React or any other framework is moving. So if you want to be on the bleeding edge, we are on the bleeding edge with you. We are shipping updates way before you get updates from iOS or .NET. So we get the betas. We are partners with Microsoft, Apple, and Google. So we will get those bits way before anybody else does. So we have had the time engineering wise to churn and make sure our stuff works with the latest runtime. So there are always the bleeding edge updates to be had. But again, the reality for enterprises is you cannot move that quickly. We have a lot of customers who are on .NET Framework, and that's fine. A lot of customers on older Angular as well. So you take your time. Whenever you are ready, you will have a version of UI components from us that's going to run on the latest and greatest. But everything is versioned. So if you want a specific version of .NET to go back to, maybe not all the way back, but somewhere in the middle, we are right there to meet you.
Um, how do you recommend if somebody's listening to this and they're one of these developers that I think many exist like this, where they're working on a legacy project that's maybe some behemoth thing that's been around forever. Maybe it's on .NET Framework and none of the cool things that you and I talk about at conferences. It's all legacy stuff. If they want to incorporate a component library into that, how do you recommend they go about it? Is that even worth doing if the app is already existing and working?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I personally don't like the word legacy. I understand what it means, but I mean, if it's running your business today, if it's an app that's keeping your enterprise workflows going, then that's present day reality for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to your point, there are a lot of gigantic apps that are slow moving, and that's because a lot of people depend on them. Enterprises are slow to adopt newer technologies and newer frameworks. So the whole thing that you're asking is essentially how do you move things forward, and modernization is kind of been on people's minds, especially if you look at the .NET stack. Things have been evolved fairly quickly. You get a new .NET every year, and with some of them you get what's called like long-term support, so you can depend on them a little bit for 3-4 years. So a lot of folks are in the boat of wanting to move things forward. So we are actually very conscious of not leaving anybody high and dry. We will support frameworks way after they have had stoppage of support from Microsoft or Angular. Like we still support things on .NET framework that Microsoft doesn't. Same with Angular or React. So we will try to support you until everybody is off the boat and on to the newest thing. So there are lots of things you can do. Just because your app has been written 10-15 years back doesn't need to look like it's still 90s or early 2000s. You can bring in little islands of modernness in your app. It's very, very difficult for a big enterprise app to say, let's just drop this whole thing and we're going to start building it from scratch. You have to think about ROI. So a more realistic approach is taking bite-sized pieces. So you can bring in a little bit of modernness in your app every release. So you're modernizing a few views, a few of the updates every release. So you can slowly move towards that updated runtime. So what you could do is keep using the UI components that were meant for your older legacy systems as they are right now. But as you move forward, look at some cross-platform strategies and see if you can reuse something more modern, just embed it inside something that's a little older, right? And there are lots of ways in which modern technologies enable us to do that. This desire to get web things working nicely on mobile and desktop, that's nothing new. We have learned a lot of tricks from the Electron days, from Mono days, and now we have Maui, we have Blazor, we have Angular, we have React and Vue. All of these web things are now very welcome to be just embedded into really old school desktop apps. So that's one way of maybe thinking about modernizing one small part of your app, bring in some web goodness. If you want to stick to your older legacy technologies, at some point you're going to have to evaluate your dependencies as well. Like, I mean, I think you and me talk about this as well. If you you look at some of these stacks, Microsoft and other bigger tech companies, they want you to move to the latest runtimes. Often it is our dependencies that are the roadblock that we are not able to move. Because I can take a WPF app or a WinForms app written 15-20 years back, and I can run it on modern .NET, which is phenomenal. But it's often the dependencies that don't let me move over because I'm depending on something that doesn't run on modern .NET. So once in a while it's okay to take a stock of your dependencies, and if it's really something that's not letting you move forward, maybe you question how much you need that, because otherwise your older legacy app will run on modern runtimes. And the moment you are on modern runtimes, you can enable a lot more code sharing and cross-platform technologies and strategies. But you sometimes need to move the underlying framework forward, and you just reevaluate your dependencies.
So if somebody wants to learn more about the specific component libraries that you guys offer at Progress, where do they go to find out about those, Sam?
Sure. So progress.com, but that's just the umbrella for everything that we do. In specific things that are near and dear to my heart is telerik.com. So telerik.com. That's where you're going to see all of the UI suites for .NET and JavaScript. You're going to see Fiddler for network debugging. You're going to see CMS. You're going to see testing solutions, reporting solutions. but mostly a lot of the UI component suites that we love to make. All of that is up at Telerik.com.
Okay, great. Final question. Like to ask everybody who comes on the podcast this, because this is kind of me cheating and making you do my homework. But what other topics besides this great, third-party component topic that we've been talking about today? What other topics or guests do you think would be useful to talk about, to talk with here on the podcast to talk about making software projects more predictably successful?
How about I give you two? Because I'm going off conversations that I've had with customers and engineers just this past week. One is nothing new, but it just keeps repeating itself, and then one is kind of on the cusp of newer technologies. So when you talk about making your app accessible and user friendly, you think a lot about design, and designers and developers, we don't always see apples to apples. Developers sometimes take decisions that are not friendly to design, and designers sometimes don't realize what some of the real demands are from the app. So there's always been that divide, and I think we have had a lot of tools that kind of help in this regard, but there's always more work to be done. We have been actually working on this quite a bit. We hear the same complaint from a lot of our customers, so we are trying to help. So you can take design system solutions from Figma. We have a thing called Theme Builder, where you can design things to your heart's content, starting from a core design system, maybe Material, maybe Fluent, or maybe you have a design system that you have built in house, and then customizing it, and then going in a loop. So developers get to work on their stuff, and then something needs to change. You come back to the designer, you redo something, and what you do has an impact everywhere throughout the app. So we are working very consciously on this designer developer divide. And I have a good friend, Catherine Grayson Nance. She's a good friend and a coworker. She's written books on design thinking, and she's just a phenomenally cool person to talk to in trying to bridge this divide. So that's one thing that comes in mind. And the other thing, which I'm sure you and me cannot walk a step in tech these days without talking about AI. It's everywhere.
Yep.
It's very popular, and I get all the excitement, but I'm also old and a little pragmatic at times. So I also get a lot of the legitimate concerns. These are still early days. I think as an industry, we might need to move a little slow and think it through, unless we want to invite a lot of regulations from people who don't essentially understand the tech. But there are some very real concerns.
Sure.
Rampant plagiarism, if you look at ChatGPT or other types of tools, security concerns, protecting your IP. When you look at assistants who help you with code, and you can get a lot production out of it from things like GitHub Copilot or other tools which help you as a developer write better code. So you're automating the repeatable tasks, but there are some concerns about how is all of this learning? Like, is it all open source GitHub things that we're learning from, or could it be something we deploy within an enterprise where I'm learning from your code and you're learning from my code, but no more? None of that goes out of the door. So there are some real concerns, but I think the promise is very much there. So there are a couple of folks at Microsoft who I'm sure you know as well, James Montemagno, Mads Christensen. They work with the Visual Studio teams to enable GitHub Copilot to work. And I've seen some of the demos of how much real language processing is happening, where you can ask a question and it skims through a lot of the comments and the code, and it tries to prescribe certain code, which is very on point at times, but sometimes it hallucinates, which is true for all AI. But I think it's just a brave new frontier. With a lot more things to explore. So, I would encourage you to go talk to those folks and pick their brains and see where they see AI going.
Great suggestions. Thank you for both of those. I'll definitely have to follow up on that. Sam, your wisdom and experience here has been really helpful. This conversation has been great. I hope that our listeners have found something useful out of it, like I have. But thank you for your time. It was great to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you for having me here. A lot of it is old man's tales, but we sometimes speak from experience. So take your time in doing whatever it is that you're building. At the end of the day, you want to be successful. You want a predictable, repeatable way to be successful with your software projects. So pick the right tools in your tool set that keeps you comfortable. You have a code base that you're happy maintaining, and you'll have happy developers and happy end users and customers.
Great advice. Thanks again, Sam. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
That's the end of this Blue Blazes podcast. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one with industry experts focused on how to make software projects more predictably successful, make sure to subscribe. Trailhead can be found online at trailheadtechnology.com, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Until next time, thanks for listening.